So this is my second test review podcast for our unit on Christian art from the early Christian late antique period through Gothic art. You do not have to memorize these dates, but I find timelines helpful. The dates that will help you keep the late antique, Byzantine, and early medieval period straight are the arrival of Christianity as an approved and then official religion in the 4th century, the reign of Justinian in the 6th century, and the iconoclasm controversy and its end in the 8th and 9th century. I'll give Romanesque and Gothic dates a little later, but I'm going to talk about the earlier works first. So, how is Christ often portrayed in early Christian art? The division of painted spaces in the fresco was influenced by, big hint, where are the framed paintings on the left located? By the way, there are catacombs questions that address information that showed up in your homework, but only briefly. The catacombs were used for burials underground. Land in Rome had simply become too expensive for graveyards or above-ground burials. Also, people used to believe that Christians had hidden in the catacombs during periods of persecution. In truth, everyone in the ancient world knew where they were, so the catacombs would have made lousy hiding places. These questions are pretty straightforward. I won't waste your time by reading them aloud. But to help you answer that last question about the persistence of Roman spatial illusionism, consider this manuscript illustration from the Vienna Genesis. We see what looks remarkably like a water nymph. We see model bodies, but we also see a castle that seems to be floating off in space without clear perspective or a ground line. The image on the left does not appear on the test. I snatched it from Wikipedia, but you should recognize the basic diagram and know the term. Note that the pendentive is a transitional element. It basically enables a dome to sit upon its walls. And of course, this is really an architecture question. Note the work on the right's similarity to the icon that is one of your required images on the left. No surprise, they came from the same monastery in Egypt. So what Byzantine features do you see in both? Well, there's that use of spiritual, unworldly gold. This is not naturalistic art. The figures are defined by heavy contours as opposed to modeling, although we still see remnants of classical modeling. Check out the knees on the icon. The figures are flat, frontal, and rather stiff. Christ in the apse portrait is Christ Pantocrator, or ruler of the world. Note he's holding an orb and surrounded again by that oval mandorla. This is not the gentle good shepherd of early Christian art, but a Christ suited to the art of empire. One big difference, however, is that icons were often meant to be touched and handled as objects of personal devotion. Icons that have survived for centuries also have part of the paint worn away due to devotional use. So what art historical period does the work on the left represent, and what features of this work identified as belonging to this period? At the risk of sounding repetitive, we again see shallow space, lack of realistic perspective, emphasis on line and contour, a frontal gaze and stance, long, thin features, and use of gold leaf. And the eyes are staring directly at us. Why? Is this work perhaps intended to connect with the viewer directly? Now here's an actual College Board question that I considered a little unfair, and so I'm going to walk you through it and give you the answer. The materials and art-making process, note how the question is phrased, used to create the work on the left demonstrate the influence of, here are your choices, A, ancient Greek red figure vase painting. Doesn't look a lot like that. New Kingdom papyrus illustrations. Hunifer, I don't think so. Late antique Egyptian funerary portraiture, and D, ancient Roman wall painting. Now, I would have been tempted to answer Roman wall painting, since this style is very similar to the wall frescoes from Pompeii. But this is where you need to read the question carefully. It was asking about materials and the art-making process. And the art-making process for the icon is encaustic, or paint mixed with wax, not fresco. Moreover, did you remember that it was found in Egypt, where that monastery was located? Egyptian funerary portraits were made of encaustic, and I've included one on the right. I think this is a tough and even unfair question, since we don't have any Egyptian funerary portraits, but now you know the answer. So why were these mosaics placed in San Vitale, a place, by the way, that Justinian never visited? To help you answer, let me remind you that the mosaic is placed facing the enthroned Christ mosaic on the apse, which you see here on the upper right. Justinian is wearing the same imperial robes as Christ. The symbolic purple, a little hard to make out on this image, highlights Justinian's role as Christ's representative on earth and presents him as a worthy successor to Constantine. Indeed, we see a deliberate reference to the first Christian emperor. One of Justinian's soldiers is carrying the Cairo shield of Constantine. All of this imagery combines to communicate Justinian's power as head of both church and state. Justinian's image likewise appears beside in the main altar in the apse, the most sacred part of the church, where only the priest could stand. By including himself, Justinian is claiming a kind of priestly power. Theodora is also in the apse, by the way, although in a lesser position. Note, the juxtaposition of the officials also suggests the need for a balance between political, religious, and military power. So how does the cross-carpet page from the Lindisfarne Gospels demonstrate the influence of migratory metalwork, such as the fibula you see on the right? Is there any narrative on the carpet page? Do you see any modeling or shading? What about figural elements? And that's tougher because both works clearly have zoomorphic images. But are these images the focus of the cross-carpet page? No, not really. I would say that the cross is. So what artistic element do they clearly have in common besides zoomorphic figures? What kind of patterning do we see? Remember the term that refers to elaborately intertwined lines? What was the function of this work? What was it used for? What technique was used to create that fish pattern? What was characteristic of this and other migratory art? In other words, what is characteristic of art that moves with people? The image on the right does not appear on the exam, but there is a question about the characteristic features of Hiberno-Saxon manuscripts, such as the Book of Kells and the Lindisfarne Gospels. What kinds of figures do you see on this and other similar manuscripts? These figures, again, show the influence of migratory art, but what aspect of the Lindisfarne Gospels shows classical influence? And I'll give you a hint. What language is it written in? Again, these questions should be self-explanatory. As we move into the Romanesque and Gothic periods, the dates get easier. Basically, the central Romanesque period goes from around 1050 to 1150, and the central Gothic period from around 1150 to 1350. This image from the Bayeux Tapestry is not included in the AP exam, but it should help you figure out the answers to some questions about this work. What event is the tapestry describing, and is it an actual historical event? What people were involved? How was this work made? What medium is it? And what materials were used? Does it contain text? And if so, in what language? What earlier work from this course depicts actual historical events emerging in a continuous narrative frieze? Think Rome. What were the two main forms of Gothic two-dimensional art? The College Board does not give you the answer by showing these images, but I am feeling generous. Note that I talked about the image on the left in my last classroom podcast. Even though it's not a required work, I could imagine this or a similar statue showing up as a part of an attribution question. So, both of these statues date from what art historical period? Both reflect religious development. What religious development in this period? What special devotion to a central religious figure? What is the term for the seated statue? The term is also the title of the work. This is a term you'll need to know in the next unit as well, by the way. What medium, that is material, is the seated statue made from? What is the distortion and anguish in the seated sculpture intended to inspire in the viewer? You should also know that polychromed means painted with multiple colors. It is not the same as encaustic, which uses wax. What is the relationship between these two works? Who was the patron of the work on the left? Who donated to the church, that is. What political development does this portrayal of Mary signify? And how is it reflected in the work on the right? Okay, I have thrown a lot of material at you. The good news is we're almost done for the semester, and a break from art history is coming.